Hi, everybody. I'm back with Penny Kelly for part two of our conversation, which was pretty intense last time around. We really kind of went through the notion of how a hidden hand is set up in our world to control this species and how it was done through the various presidents of the United States. And this is across all parties. And Penny and I had a really interesting discussion on all of this, and we cut the conversation off when it came to Trump and then what's coming up in her visions, what the robes have shown her, some of my own visions, and how these start dovetailing together regarding our future. So we're going to go ahead and launch on into the phenomena called Donald Trump. Okay? Hi, Penny. You're back, and here we are again, part two. The first conversation was just kind of loaded with content, information, data.
Yeah.
And this time, we're going to, now we get to the part where people start saying, yeah, but let's talk about that. We're going to get into the phenomena of Donald Trump. So we've come out of Obama. Everyone's terribly disappointed because the things that we hoped would happen did not happen. In fact, as I mentioned, we dropped more bombs than we ever had. Certainly enough that we ran out of them. Okay, so that's not cool. People are angry, and now we have Donald Trump. And now we're going to get into the nuances around how he came into power. And I want you to first share your understanding and the sources that you used, your own meditations, and why you resonated with this person as being a conscious participant in trying to turn around the country and also push back the cabal. Okay?
Okay. So Donald Trump, when I first heard that he was going to run for president, I was embarrassed for him. I thought, what? That's not that's going to be a disaster. He's going to be embarrassed. He's never going to be elected. I really felt like that was a joke. And he took off and he started with his campaign. And I don't know how far into that campaign I started hearing really thoughtful people saying, hey, the word on the street is this guy is really on the up and up. And I thought, oh, okay, I'm reserving judgment. And then one of my clients, friends, both actually, working with Neil Keenan, said that Donald Trump had been asked to run. And there had been a meeting, and that the meeting that Keenan had set up a meeting in Europe, and that meeting had been, he had invited a bunch of countries to come in because what he had found out was that that the United States was squeezing people, other countries, for 10 million here, 20 million there, 30 million over there, and they were tired of that kind of behavior, extortion. And then so Keenan invited all these countries to come to his meeting, and hardly anybody showed up. I think maybe 30 or 40 representatives showed up. But nobody expected those 30 or 40 people to survive. And when the meeting took place, and it was crashed by the Rockefeller goons, they moved that meeting out onto a ship, and then the ship was harassed by somebody's jets. The Rockefeller, I think it's really important, let me digress here for a moment, to say something that the little man in brown robes said to me that I did not really realize how powerful that statement was. They said the rise of business to power, in the rise of business to power, that these executives, these companies, these corporations were going to have their own armies, their own economy, their own guns, their own spies, their own communication system. Everything that we had as a nation, they were going to duplicate.
Yeah, now this, you have to go back. This was back in 1979 early 80s. This was before we had any understanding of this. John Perkins has since made the word corporatocracy kind of mainstream almost, and,
Right.
and sharing his own adventures as one of the a member of it, right, and of the intelligence community. These now have human status, these corporations, and they're running exactly like the robes told you they would.
That's right. That's right. So I kind of overlooked all of that information, thought, oh, yeah, that's interesting, and kept right on going. But when Keenan had his meeting and it was crashed, and then they brought in jets to try to, they moved the meeting out onto a yacht, and then the jets were like buzzing the yacht, and then finally somebody, I don't know who it was, a member of who was attending this meeting, called for their own country's jets to come in and chase away maybe it was helicopters with guns on them. I'm not sure that it was jets, but there was some kind of a scuffle in the air, and the meeting ended, and that meeting then proceeded, those people then proceeded to say, okay, we're going to do something about this. We have to end this corruption. And that then ended up being the plan to do a full-blown military coup in the United States in 2012. And that then ended up getting scrapped. And they said, let's invite a president in who will work with us. And that man was Donald Trump. And they made an agreement. The military, very Christian, wanted to take out all of those people, all of those forces who were involved in fraud, in money laundering, in lying, in cheating, in backdoor deals, in child rape and sex trafficking, pedophilia of all sorts, Satanism, cannibalism, all kinds of ugly, ugly stuff. And they wanted that gone. They said, we can't have an honorable company or country with this kind of stuff going on. And so they invited Donald Trump to be president, and he was appalled at the economic decisions that were being made, because they were all being made by Obama to crash the United States. So Trump and the military made a deal, and the military, it wasn't just our military, it was, if my sources are correct, there were quite a few people from the old royal families who had gone underground in World War I and World War II trying to survive, because the effort was to take out those old royal families and just establish banking and business as the way that we were going to run the world. And all of that is all explained in the book. But long story short, Trump comes on board, he gets the nomination, and somewhere along the line, I realized we're going to have to kiss this frog. And maybe he'll turn into a prince. And I don't vote. I'm not political. I've never been on either side. And so I see the good on both sides. I see the bad on both sides. And Trump all of a sudden is looking like he's going to win. And I knew he was going to win, even though all the polls kept saying, Hillary's got this in the bag. I thought, no, she doesn't. She does not.
That brings in a couple of really interesting points, a whole bunch of interesting points. And we're not going to kind of go tit for tat on this. I'm just going to bring up some points, and then we'll keep moving through the conversation, because everyone has their own point of view on Trump for sure. Right. So the part about Hillary, I don't want to miss commenting on that. But I'm going to tell you what happened. Right after he was elected, I woke up the next morning and I thought, what just happened? I had one of those kind of instant meditations where you barely close your eyes and boom, everything just shows itself in a flash. And usually they're pretty complex. Like the morning the planes went into the towers on 9/11, I just was overwhelmed to sit down, and I was shown, again, I didn't know about conspiracy at this time. I was shown this was an inside job, and there was collusion between our government and other factions. So it all just kind of shows up in a flash. What happened this particular morning was when I closed my eyes, almost like the end of a silent film where it says the end, the scrolly letters in cursive. This screen came up black, and in white letters in cursive, it simply, almost happily wrote, "The Destroyer." And I thought, okay, now that has a lot of connotations. And I thought, our system's in bad shape. This person, who I do not approve of on any personal level because of his behavior and such, but nonetheless, I understood, okay, if so be it, if this system has to come down in its current form and restructured in a proper, more moral and ethical form, and there's someone that has to play this game out, then, well, he's the perfect person because he's a loose cannon and he has a hot temper and he throws people under the bus. So what more perfect person, I guess, could you have doing it, even though I didn't vote for him, and I don't really approve of his behavior, as I've already said, and what he stands for. Nonetheless, your people are saying he's a vehicle. He's the frog that you decided to kiss and others have decided to kiss. Either way, nobody's saying this is a highly moral and perfect person. Nobody's trying to say that in any camp. But
No.
I think they're saying more, yes, but he's coming in with intention to try to take back some power and give the people some dignity again from the cabal. And that's really where the two sides fight with each other. I say, no, I think he's unconscious and useful to whatever forces need to use him. And you and the people that follow him the other way feel, no, he's consciously engaged and wants to see this happen too. And that's really where the divide happens, is just those two positions. And then, of course, people who just say, I hate him so much, I don't ever want to hear his name again. He's so disgusting, so to speak. That's another camp. So
Yeah.
just wanted to stage that so we can say we all want the same thing. It's how we're receiving the engagement of this individual.
Well, what I wanted was not so much, what was not Trump. What I wanted was a sign, a signal that people were ready, willing, and able to rise above the consciousness of corruption. And Trump happened to be that vehicle. And so it was really hard, when you have to kiss a frog, that's not an easy task. You have to go against everything that is your normal. And you have to. And here's the thing, which I talk about in the book, it was all part of what I call the trickster setup. Now, in consciousness, whether it's an individual or whether it's a country or a corporation, there comes a moment in time when you have to make a choice. You have to make a decision. And there are things on the table that you may not know about because you're naive, and there's a time limit. So you can't drag it out. And so what we had was this two choices. We had Hillary, who looked normal and was making all the right promises and all the right noises and everything, but she was the front for a humongous amount of corruption. And then we had this, what I call this orange-haired clown over here that, was really a frog dressed up like a man. And he was making all kinds of strange noises and promises and behaviors. And I think when you have a nation that for 50 years has become so accustomed to lies and BS, but they know the political rhetoric. They know what they should be listening for. It's that nice, smooth, I promise I'm going to make it better for you. I promise we're going to do this. And then they get in power and don't do anything they said they were going to do. And we had that for 50 years. And everybody thought that was normal. And then, the trickster setup is you have to make a choice. You're at the fork in the road. You choose one or the other, and if you choose the old path and the old corruption, you're going down. If you choose this new thing where nothing is guaranteed, nothing looks normal, nothing sounds normal, nothing is playing out like it used to play out, then what you usually enter into is a period of testing. That test we had for 2017. Trump brings in, a bunch of his people that are not his people, people that we knew were part of the cabal. And I'm watching this going, oh my God, those were bad guys. What's he doing? And what he was doing was putting people in place so that he could watch them directly and get evidence of what they were doing firsthand. Not hearsay, not old stories, but what's going on. And they were trying to get to who's the kingpins, where are the kingpins. So we had to just go through this period. Trump also made it look like nothing was happening that was any different. Why? Because he wanted the people who were doing the corrupt thing to kind of slide right back into what they were doing, thinking that they could continue without interruption. So, so we went through this whole 10-month period, and then all of a sudden, boom, out come the announcements, out comes Q, very much vilified, and all of a sudden it begins to look like, wow, this is a sting. This,
okay, yeah, go ahead. Explain what the sting is, and then I'll follow up.
So the sting was that we elected Trump. Trump was going to go in and pretend that nothing was going to be any different than it ever had been. And he allowed, himself to look like an idiot, which he said something.
That's not a difficult task for Trump.
I was going to say, something similar. There were times when I looked at or listened to what he said and thought, did you have to say it that way? But he was learning. I could see the difference between the February speeches and the August speeches, for instance. And you listen for little bitty signs that the consciousness is shifting, and et cetera, et cetera. But, this out comes this sting. And what the sting was, you put me in, and I'm going to take out the corruption. I'm going to let everybody proceed with all the crap that they've been doing, and I'm going to watch and see where all of the corruption is taking place. And then I'm going to use my power, the military, the executives, executive orders, etc., to begin to take out people who are aligned with this kind of corruption. And the first victim, if you will, was Saudi Arabia. The next one was North Korea. That whole thing around North Korea was totally a mistake or a misperception or misrepresentation on the part of mainstream media. I think it's important for people to understand that North Korea and Iran and Venezuela were all going to be used as cabal strongholds to threaten the rest of the world. And so that's where all of the uproar around Iran is taking place at the present moment. We already settled most things with North Korea. We're not settled with Venezuela yet, but Trump is working on those.
Let's go ahead and take it back a little bit too.
Okay.
So one of the things the cabal uses is the media to install whoever they wish, more or less, by on one hand persuading public perception, and then on the other hand we have the intimate structure underneath, in quote, our democracy, the electoral college, which basically swings it however they want anyway in the end. So popular vote on one level matters, on another it doesn't. It matters in the theater of perception. Let's talk about that for a moment. One inconsistency with this was Fox News. Now, Fox News was the #1 station when Donald Trump was elected. And in fact, it's amazing all the different series that are coming out now on Netflix and other networks showing one called The Family, about the deep Christian structure underneath the leadership through this series called The Family. It's very interesting in what it shows, because on one hand you're thinking, well, this man, Doug, is really trying to put a committed, moralistic fiber at the backbone of all of the presidents that he has been involved with throughout history, and they have deep influence in their gatherings, which we know as the breakfast. What's it called? The big breakfast.
I think the National Prayer Breakfast.
Prayer breakfast that happens every year. We know, and this one man is at the core of all it. So the series goes on to show that there is this Christian core that is wanting to kind of take back our country on a moral level, but they also do a lot of deals. So you look at it from another level and think, yeah, but a lot of money passes through this structure as well. So like everything else, it's complex and it seems to be flawed, but it also seems some people really have an interest in exactly what you're saying. You have another one that came out recently on Showtime called The Loudest Voice, and I watch all of these because I want to see what the media is doing.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one. The Loudest Voice?
Mm-hmm. The Loudest Voice, and it's on the rise of Fox News as a result of bringing Roger Ailes, who since has passed, onto Fox News, where Rupert Murdoch brought him in thinking, wow, this guy knows how to shake things up. As the story goes on, without ruining the punchline, because anyone who follows the news probably already knows the punchline, Fox News gave the vast majority of their time as the #1 network to covering Donald Trump. The Rupert Murdoch and his sons forbade Roger Ailes to do that. He did it anyway as a personal right-wing agenda of his own. He decided, and he told Trump, you stick with me, Manafort's not giving you good advice, I will get you elected. Roger Ailes actually resorted to writing some of Trump's more famous speeches for him and giving him the vehicle to speak. So you can look at that on any level, but that wasn't the cabal. That was Roger Ailes doing what he wanted to do. Of course, he was taken down. Everybody was taken down through sex scandals, which is another big part of that story, probably the primary part of it. But it's what I'm saying here is if the cabal is involved in blocking certain people from having coverage, it can also then Fox Network oppose that by giving him essentially all their coverage. All you ever heard in the news that whole election cycle was Trump. You didn't really hear much about anyone else.
Right.
And then finally, just the piece on Hillary. Myself and many, many other women who have wanted to see a female president had an innate distrust of Hillary Clinton, and probably because of what we had learned about the Clintons and the Bush Association and so forth. So what you're saying is true. We essentially distrusted her to continue on as part of the cabal. So that's kind of where I'm just kind of throwing a few things into the fabric of what you're saying that people can go check out for themselves. Again, The Loudest Voice, which is on Showtime, and then The Family, which is on Netflix, to see a little bit of fabric underneath this whole thing. So here he is now, and now we're in the situation we're in at this very moment. And here's where I really want to start bringing in the messages from the rogues regarding what our future looks like, and how you dovetail this with the presence of Donald Trump on the scene. Yeah.
That was totally unprepared for, unexpected. So I'm struggling with Donald Trump, and I'm struggling because all of a sudden I had this naive attitude that Trump was in there, and when I realized that he was taking out the cabal, I was like, yes. And I had this feeling, this temporary perception that he was really in there fighting for me. And then that went into something much more sophisticated. I realized it wasn't just a coup, it wasn't just a sting, that there was a war going on very quietly between two sides, the cabal side and the Trump side. The cabal is a bunch of corporations and billionaires. Trump is a billionaire, and he has a lot of people with power behind him as well, also billionaires. And all of a sudden it became this this aha that this was a war between these gigantic corporate dinosaur billionaire forces with all of their armies and their, you know, their spies and everything that the little men in brown robes had said they would bring to bear on the situation. And at that moment, I kind of had a sort of a wake up, realizing that, you know, we didn't need to really worry because we weren't having the war. The billionaires and the corporations were having the war. And Trump, I think, is going to take out some of those big corporations that are his enemies, Google, Apple, you know, et cetera. That's going to amount to winning the war on Trump's side. And, you know, if he breaks them up, et cetera. So it dawned on me that, okay, what's our role? What are we doing? What are the people? What, you know, we're not just cheerleaders, and we're not just collateral down here saying, yay, Trump, you know, yay, Hillary. That's not what it was about. For me, the whole thing shifted to become this message, this terrible, wonderful opportunity to evolve consciousness, because whether Trump wins, loses, or draws, it doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter because of the corruption, but it doesn't matter in terms of what we, the people, have to face, because if he wins, everything is going to change. And we need to be having a finger in that creative process. If Trump loses, everything is going to change. And I don't know that we're going to have much to say in that instance, but in the process of...
Just one thought there, Penny. As it stands right now in all the polls and such, Trump is losing at the moment, but then things change over time. And one of the people that's coming toward the top of the poll, I think in number 2 place, is a woman, and is Elizabeth Warren, who rages against the bankers and against the cabal herself. She doesn't appear to be bought off. Bernie Sanders isn't bought off for sure. And they're also going and raging against the very same cabal. So it's interesting to see what Joe Biden probably will fall by the wayside, it sounds like, but it's interesting that the people that are in the place running on the other Democratic platform are also anti-cabal. The 2 main ones don't seem to be in bed with them. So it might be that everything goes on and continues progressing, but it's up to us and our consciousness. So that's why I want to get down into the story of what's coming up for Earth, getting into the 2-Earth scenario and all of that.
Okay, so perfect. So I'm agonizing about this whole war thing, and in the middle of all of that, my first husband gets diagnosed with lung cancer, and in 19 days he's gone. And the whole family is in uproar. Everybody's crying. You know, he died on Christmas Eve. We're like, oh my God. So we didn't really have a Christmas last year much at all. And so I'm like, I need a break. It's just been one trauma after the next. I'm worried about our country, blah, blah, blah. And I'm dealing with all my kids who are crying over, you know, the fact that their dad is gone. So I get on my treadmill and I'm looking through my favorite channels, science and math channels. And I come across this title says, the real cause of the ice ages. And that's one of the things I've been watching for a long time. And I click on that. And by the time I got off the treadmill, I was in absolute and utter shock, because the information that I came across was put out there by Doug Vogt. His information was that this is how an ice age actually begins. This is what he had discovered, you know, put together, and it made the whole Trump business look like small potatoes. Like it didn't matter. It's like, oh my gosh, we don't really need to be worrying about Trump. Let Trump worry about what he's bitten off. He's got to chew that cud. We have our own things that we have to face. And that was how I started shifting what I was writing about, because I couldn't think about Trump or anything else. It was like, oh my gosh, regardless, it looks like we're going to have to create an entirely new civilization. And that then got it got me thinking, okay, how do we do this? How do we shift the consciousness of this? So I might be skipping ahead too far, so stop me if you...
No, it's okay, because I'll just kind of bring you back and we'll share stories that intersect.
Okay. So the whole piece of science that I started researching was really about this Doug Vogt, this guy who had been an accountant early in life, and he got interested in the stars, and he started creating a database of stars, and he noticed that there were no stars about 12,000 light years out from the Earth. And he said, oh, that's really odd. And then he is continuing to build the database, and he notices no stars 24,000 years out. And there's none 36,000 years.
When you say 12, 24, and 36,000 years out, we're talking about actual timeline, years-wise.
We're talking about light years. Sorry.
We're talking about light years. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So 12,000 light years away from the Earth, he didn't see any stars. 24,000, 36, 48, 60, 72,000 light years out. There's these bands where there's no stars, and he's trying to figure out why there's no stars there. And the long story short is that he begins to piece together this understanding of the solar system and how the sun behaves. And what he says is that about every 12,000 years, the sun does what's called he calls it a small nova, mini nova, micronova. And before he put his theory together, it was believed that the sun, if any star that did a nova, would be destroyed. And he said, no, that's not the case. And then he found evidence for stars that had undergone a nova and had this immense dust cloud around them. And then the dust cloud parted just a little. You could still see the star inside. And he was like, well, that star wasn't destroyed. So he began to realize that the sun, about every 12,000 years, blew off all of the dust and the debris and the stuff that it had collected over the previous 12,000 years, and just blew that off. And it became this massive explosion and massive dust cloud. And the explosion created a compression event on our planet. And when you compress a gas, the temperature goes up. And he was estimating that the temperature would go up on the sun-facing side of the Earth, whatever side gets hit by this compression, would go up to about 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And about 17 hours later, the dust cloud would arrive and pulverize everything. And by that time, the planet would have rotated a little bit, he said. And so the side that was on fire, because it had been severely compressed, was not necessarily the area that would get hit by the dust cloud. And so it really, I mean, it's a very complicated and elegant kind of a theory, and he worked on it for quite a long time. And he said, when you have a compression, when the dust cloud hits, he said, not only do you have the atmosphere blown away by that dust cloud on the side of the Earth facing the sun there, on the back side, the atmosphere is going to expand to come around, because that's how gases behave. And when a gas expands, the temperature drops. And he said it's going to drop probably into the range of minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit. flash freezes everything, and on that side, and it's an extinction level event.
And this is getting more and more play with a lot of the people in alternative areas of archaeology, like Graham Hancock and others, where they talk about these extinction events that happen periodically. Now, the latest thinking there is that it actually has to do with a collision with a meteorite or comet that may happen simultaneously at different places on the Earth. But it seems that whether it's the kind of event you're talking about, or whether it's being struck by a comet or whatnot, that these things do happen periodically, and they result in kind of an extinction level event, and oftentimes with the waters rising and covering the planet. And I think everything's leading back to the notion that even though it's been written biblically and actually in every single culture, that our Earth does go through these cataclysms upon occasion, right?
That's true. That's true. I think one of the things that it's important to understand is that the magnetic field around the Earth is what keeps the Earth rotating. And if we get hit by this cloud of dust, it's going to bump that Earth, and we may stop rotating for a few hours. And it'll start up again, but in that rotation, when that rotation stops, the oceans are not going to stop. They're going to roll right across the land. And I think it's important to understand. I'm kind of, let me kind of digress here for a moment. There have been a lot of pieces that I've read or uncovered. I went looking for some evidence that he was wrong. I didn't find a whole lot. I didn't find anything. Some of his numbers and his figures might be questionable, but the event that occurs that he describes answers questions that have been unanswered in archaeology, paleontology, climatology, geology, solar system dynamics, et cetera, for more than 100 years. How did we get all these shredded trees and plants and animals frozen into a homogeneous layer of mud 90 feet thick up in Alaska?
Right.
That's a huge, you would have to have 200 degrees minus, in Fahrenheit to flash freeze that kind of stuff.
So as I recall reading your book, what startled you about this is when doing the mathematical calculations and hooking it into our timeline, that it appeared one of those events would be occurring around 2046. Now we know also from other events that have been predicted, they didn't happen the way they were supposed to happen.
Right.
So we know they happen on occasion. We can get comfortable with that. Hopefully everyone understands they chose to incarnate at this time, and we too will, if we go through and reincarnate again, we'll be back in 2 or 3 generations ourselves. So we're all intricately woven into this by choice.
I hope you're enjoying this video, because if you are, there are dozens more like it on my site, all supported by people like you. So if you'd like to keep this work rolling in and join our community, just click on the Patreon button at reginameredith.com. That also gives you access to insider commentary, my live book club, and other live events with special guests. So join in. Thanks.
Let's go into now the consciousness part of it and what the robes showed you, and then I'm going to share a thing or two with you on that level as well.
Okay, so I'm reading all this and watching all this and studying this and realizing how many scientific theories have been proposed to try to answer the questions that Doug Vogt answered in one little set of 5 or 7 videos. So I'm realizing that we really need to expand consciousness. We really need to evolve consciousness. And I'm trying to poo-poo this whole thing. And then I'm realizing, oh my gosh, the little men in brown robes, what was the very first thing they showed me? It was, they took me out away from the planet, and they said, just watch. And what I saw was the planet bobbling back and forth. And I was so shocked by that. And they made the statement, the earth is a living being. At the same time that I was watching this earth bob back and forth, it looked like a fishing bobber on somebody's fishing line. And I remember thinking at the time, what do you mean the earth is a living being? And I was totally distracted by that statement, but I was watching that immense destruction. Oh my gosh, that went on. And I did not want to write about that when I wrote Robes, because number one, I didn't want it to be true. Number two, I didn't want it to be a doom and gloom book. So ended up, I realized that they were saying to me, hey, this happens. And they made this statement, if there's just a little bit more development of consciousness, there needn't be any suffering at all.
Yes.
And yeah.
Okay, no, I'll add something to that. Most of the people that watch my shows know that I have my own beings that I've been, in companionship with forever, and have information passed through from them on occasion. And one of the things they said about 30 years ago that was probably, for me at the time, maybe 35 years ago now, kind of a brain teaser, was exactly what you said. They said, someone must have asked the question about, are Edgar Cayce's prophecies going to come true, where they're seeing parts of, California and the East Coast and New York break off and, fall into the ocean and so forth. And the answer was, some of this will come to pass, but some of it will not come to pass. And it is largely dependent on the level of consciousness of the people in that region. And I hadn't yet stopped to understand that our mind is inextricably intertwined. Our hearts, our minds are inextricably intertwined with those of Earth. And so, of course, it makes sense if we've lifted our frequencies, lifted our levels of compassion and kindness toward one another in the Earth, that it would change her frequencies, which could change physical outcomes, just like in our own bodies.
Right. Yeah, that is so important. I did not know about that statement that Cayce made, but that's really heartwarming.
Cayce didn't make that statement. Cayce was basically showing the potential of future Earth changes. And so the beings that I'm speaking about said it does not need to go that way. The same things that the Robes told you, depending on the level of consciousness of the people, which I find very beautiful, very hopeful, and it puts it back in our own power, our own hands.
That's right. I remember after I remembered that the Robes had shown me this, it became harder to poo-poo it. It became harder to deny it. It was like, oh, wow. If I hadn't been shown that, I might have been able to say, to vote in the CIA and, suspicious observers and all those people. You guys, you're just being negative. Stop that. But because I had seen this whole thing with the Robes and I saw the aftermath, it wasn't good. That really made it very difficult for me to deny. And then I remembered this conversation I had with these beings that picked me up on a regular basis, because, I'm supposed to be part of this team here, raising consciousness, teaching people about the mind and consciousness. And they said to me at one point, what have you done to move this consciousness, this human consciousness forward? And I was feeling kind of guilty that at that point in time that I hadn't done enough, and I hadn't done what I was supposed to be doing, and I was making excuses. But they said to me, it's too late. And I was like, hell no, it's not too late.
But wait a minute. But wasn't this, these weren't the robes. This was another
No,
entity that told you that, right?
that's right. Yeah, these were ET.
I'm wondering about that one.
Okay, these were ET beings.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to say, because of my travels in consciousness and my understanding of frequencies and how to move among them, that there are lots of dimensions out there.
There
And
are.
so the robes, the elves, angels, ETs, other humanoids are all part of my world. And my understanding of the nature of reality is maybe different from other people. But when these ET beings said it's too late, and we're no longer willing to help you, I got upset, and really got angry with them, and said, no, it's not too late, and it's not too late because we're just getting started. And you guys, you have never raised teenagers. I've raised teenagers, and I know what it's like to be hopeless. And I was yelling at the top of my lungs and waving my arms around like a crazy woman. and, and my insistence was, you will too help us, because we're going to wake up late and we're going to need your help because we are waking up. And so, there was this kind of a standoff moment, and then finally one of them nodded, and I was taken off to another spot to, talk with someone else. But a lot of pieces that I thought I understood from the robes, from the elves, from these ET beings, all of a sudden began to come together. I began to understand, oh, this is what they're pushing us to do. And then I began to realize I started looking ahead, and saw that this whole process, if it's going to happen, we want to be somewhere else. And I had an argument with a friend of mine. It wasn't really an argument. It was just, I was having a freak out moment. Do you understand what we're up against and what's coming, and blah, 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 and we're all going to be dead? And I'm carrying on, And he said, now, wait a minute. And I said, what are we going to do? And he said to me this one key statement: I don't know. You're the one with all the experiences and consciousness. You tell me what we should do. And it was kind of like a slap in the face that got me to realize I have been other places. And one of the places was another Earth. And that Earth was an astoundingly dynamic and beautiful place where consciousness was fully awake. Everybody, everything, every grain of sand, every flower, every doorknob, every brick in every building, everything was alive, aware, and communicating. And that really was kind of like a turning point for me, where I realized, oh, there is another place that we can go. We just have to figure out how to get there.
Okay, interesting. So you and I both know that also in Dolores Cannon's work, and I was regressed by Dolores, and it was one of the last catastrophe periods. In fact, it was the final day of a great catastrophe where at that time Atlantis was now gone. So I was part of, she wrote about it in, I think, Convoluted Universe 2. She changed my name, but many other people were in her books, and they also talked about a two-Earth scenario. So I'd like to share with you my exposure to the two-Earth scenario, which happened probably in the mid-'80s, again, by the beings that I'm associated with. And they said, do understand, because there is such a variance in the level of consciousness among the people on your planet, Some are still like little kindergartners. They're still learning about the basic concepts of compassion and kindness and playing things out that are quite destructive. And others are pretty far along on that path. It's no longer serving to be in the same place anymore. The divergence of lessons, you have a kindergarten, first grade classroom doesn't belong with a graduate school classroom, so to speak, because it just each slows the other down. They said this has been anticipated for a very long period of time, and a second Earth is already in existence, has already been created, and because you have amnesia between lifetimes, you won't know the difference. And it's not a punishment to anyone to go to the one to continue learning rudimentary lessons, because as soon as they've been learned, you jump to the other, jump wherever you want to go. You're not a captive on Earth, period. You can go to other places to incarnate. So when they explained that, the big question became, which Earth is this one? Is this the remedial place, or is this the beautiful place, right? And so they explained to me, they said, well, first of all, your Earth is going through a subdimensional shift into a higher frequency range. Now, this was a long time ago that they told me this, right? Many other people have been there since then.
Yeah.
And they said, understand that this Earth will continue perfecting and healing and refining herself. Those that have the frequencies that have been elevated enough to keep pace with her will continue incarnating to the Earth you're on currently. But in the future, it will be a kinder and gentler,
Right.
more integrated experience with people that are more like-minded, working more toward the same higher kinds of consciousness and agendas, so to speak, which meant the other Earth, they said, is already being populated with people that are still learning more kind of functionally rudimentary lessons, and they can learn faster and more easily in the company of each other, where all these things are being pushed against each other all of the time.
Yeah.
So that's one idea of the two Earth scenario that I found really fascinating. So go ahead and comment on that before I make a comment on your beautiful, the beautiful Earth experience you were shown.
Yeah, I think that's really quite true. When I have been in altered states and in other dimensions of reality and thought I was in this one and I wasn't, what I realized early on was that the whole idea of another place, it was identical to what we already had, except for one or two details. Just some little thing would be different, and I would think, I know I'm in the right reality. I know that, that this is just like what I have, and then some little bitty thing would be different, and I would think, that can't happen in the 3D reality. It doesn't happen. And so then I would be, oh, okay. And the surprise of that would usually shift me into the 3D. So
right. That's interesting, because one of the things I noticed in checking in with that reality of the other Earth planet is that it did not seem to have high technology available. It was a more basic level of living, so that hadn't been introduced to start playing with and messing with at not as developed levels of consciousness, kind of like where we are right now, as a matter of fact. It hadn't been introduced there yet. So that's kind of interesting.
Well, okay. So what I have observed is that they don't have technology because they have the full use of the power of consciousness.
Okay, so it's almost the same picture, but kind of in reverse.
Right.
If you're listening to this other view of it, this is the planet that will be taking place on, where we will have full access and fully developed consciousness. It's just
right
down the road.
I think this particular reality is it's three-dimensional, it's physical, and it's very, very stable, and it teaches stability. And so we have projected our ability to be clairaudient into technology like radio and Zoom, and we projected our clairvoyance into television.
I think that's our future. I've seen the same thing when I've been taken on forward journeys. That's exactly what I see, that technology is completely integrated with consciousness and with earth energies and dynamics. I've seen the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so here we are at this place. I think it's really, it's a unique moment in time where we can say, okay, how do I get to that Earth that doesn't have a nova? That where we don't have to go through that because, for whatever reason.
Okay. Well, let me just go ahead and add in the part about the beautiful Earth you saw, where everything was
Yeah.
conscious and perfected. So, as a student of hermetics, which I have been for many, many years, which is kind of very diverse, it goes through everything, science, arts, and you know,
Yep.
you know that.
Yeah.
What they talk about and describe exactly as you described is what they call the fourth plane, okay, the fourth realm. And what they say is when the consciousness of the human has expanded to that point of compassion, awareness, living into the true virtues, we're talking about ethics and morality that really serve us and everyone else, then when you pass from that incarnation, you actually then start embodying yourself into the fourth realm, which is exactly what you described.
Yeah.
It's the next place, because I think we have to remember the Earth, just as we, is multidimensional. And if she already has a perfected multidimensional version of herself that we can incarnate into, that does already exist. It is very stable. It doesn't have illness or nor wishing ill toward each other. It already exists. It's beautiful. All we have to do is elevate our consciousness enough to be able to merge with that. And throughout cultures, historically, the people that end up there are always called the followers of the sun, the followers of Horus, the shining ones. They always give them names, but it's basically us who have elevated consciousness as human beings who end up populating that beautiful place that may be the place you saw.
Well, I've been there about 4 times now. And the last time was accidental. And I'm not sure how I got there. But the fact that I have been there, I couldn't place that. It was like, what do I do with that? Why was I there? What was that about? Well, once I learned about the nova and started realizing, we needed to develop consciousness in order to be able to get out of here without the trauma, without the big trauma.
Again.
Yeah, again, you're right. Then it was like, oh, that's what they took me there because they wanted me to know that was there and existed. And I think I mentioned in the book about a woman named Landy Hurd, who was, she came to a meeting that Dr. Levengood had, and she makes this comment. Well, the last time I was picked up, or in my 20s or something like that, I was picked up by these ETs, and they took her and they showed her that something was terribly wrong with the sky. And they said to her, there's going to come a time in your future when we are going to come to your door and we're going to ask you to go with us, and you're going to have 2 seconds to say yes or no. And there isn't going to be time to pack. There isn't going to be time to say goodbye to your children or your husband or your neighbors or anybody. It's just going to be, it's now or never. And when she told that story, I thought, why would they be doing that? What would be the possibility that they would say, we have 2 seconds to get out of here? And what that has brought me to is this realization that that's where we are as terrestrial citizens. We now have technology. It's not public yet, but it's out there, and I know about it. So it'll be coming through the consciousness of everybody. But the question has to be asked, where are we going? What is our future? Why do we want to develop our consciousness? Because I think we're moving toward becoming a space-based civilization. And you have to be not dependent on a mineral terrestrial planet. You have to be, and I've seen these, we're moving into the future where we learn how to assemble frequencies to produce a substance. I call them manifestation chambers, but in the future we are putting these frequencies together to create what we need. And they're already doing that with water and a few other things. If we can do that, if we can manifest or create water out of thin air, we are on our way to becoming a space-based civilization. And why would you want to be space-based? Because it's dangerous to stay on any given planet for too long, given the dynamics of a solar system and the way stars behave. And just in the last 6 months, I think there's been 6 small novas that have been reported in various science and astronomy channels that people are saying, oh, wow, that was a little one. That was a bigger one. That we're beginning to understand that a solar system is a pretty, it's a pretty dynamic place. And there's always been this bias toward, what do they call it? There's a theory in science that says everything happens very, very slowly. And what they're realizing is that's not the case. It doesn't have big, humongous changes. This whole nova thing is supposedly takes place in like within a couple of days, a day or two. And in fact, I was going to offer to read a description of it from the ancient Sumerians. It's like 15 lines if you want me to read it.
Sure, go for it.
Okay. Hang on one second. Let me see if I can find it here. I had it marked.
Go ahead and look for it. While you're looking for it, I'll just add, go ahead. You found it?
Yeah. Okay. This is a Sumerian description of what they call the Great Deluge. It says, quote, "The moon disappeared in the dust. The appearance of the weather changed. The rains roared in the clouds. The winds became savage. The deluge set out. Its might came upon the people like a battle. One person did not see another. The deluge bellowed like a bull. The winds whinnied like a wild ass. The darkness was dense. The sun could not be seen." And that fits almost perfectly with Doug Vogt's description. When the water, or when the sun fries the earth, if it hits over an ocean, it's going to evaporate about 1,200 feet of ocean water, and then that's going to come back down as rain, and it's going to rain and rain and rain and rain. And when the dust cloud blows away part of the atmosphere and the rest of the atmosphere expands, not only are there cold temperatures, but there's tremendous winds, 100, 200 miles an hour. And so when I read that description, that actually came from Zecharia Sitchin's book, The 12th Planet. When I read that, I thought, what does he mean the deluge set out? And how was it that Noah, I don't think they called him Noah in the book, how was it that they knew that this thing was coming?
Right. They did know, and the seers and sages of the day always knew when these things were going to occur, and we can presume they're going to happen again. And like I said earlier, we will or will not be incarnate on this earth at that time. And Freddie Silva wrote a recent book. He and I went to Sardinia to look at some of the ancient past there, having to do with the research he's done. His new book's called Missing Lands. I have an interview with him here on reginameredith.com. Then we have a 3 or 4 part special coming out with the implications of the island of Sardinia through Gaia. They're working on that in production right now, which will be really, really beautiful. But the point he's making is that as these destructions have occurred, there are these stories through the people that have continued to be perpetuated throughout history. And this is on a kind of positive note here, that there are people that do survive somewhere. Sometimes they're on hilltops, sometimes they're in caves. But that these ones called the shining ones, the ones who seem to be choosing to come from the fourth realm or the other dimension that's already really worked on itself consciously, come and they begin to reintroduce higher concepts. They begin to retrain people into using their own intuition and how to grow crops again if they've forgotten through a mass kind of extinction of memory. And the shining ones come and reestablish and we start over again. I think this conversation is basically saying, do we want to be part of that kind of primitive starting over again and again and again? Or do we want to progress our consciousness so we can move on to another realm, another version of Earth? Or is Earth herself simply going to pick herself up into a higher status, heal all the damage we've done, and we can come back here in a more beautiful way? There are a lot of options here.
That's true. That's so true. And I think we do get to choose.
Mm-hmm.
And we choose with our consciousness. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think we're at this fork in the road. The little men in brown robes said this 40 years ago. You're coming to the fork in the road. You're going to have to decide. And their criteria were very simple. Either you nurture life or you don't.
Exactly. That is the perfect dividing line. You nurture life, you nurture relationships, you nurture passion, respect, love, or you don't.
That's right.
I think that's why I wanted to have this conversation so you and I can talk about what we all have in common here. It doesn't matter who we support or what we think is going on at the top. In the end, we have serious choices to make in our own life. And I recently wrote a blog a couple of weeks ago on my Facebook page, which is just called Regina Meredith, Regina Journalist. And in it, I went into a meditation and just did some automatic typing. And what came out was interesting. It said, what you're seeing in your world is the result of our having let go of our conscience.
Ooh,
our conscience.
Yeah. Right.
And we've compromised it away. We've been encouraged to. We've compromised our conscience away. And it goes on a bit, talking about this, how our next step in recovering ourselves is to truly start living with, purchasing with, voting with, creating relationships with, and societies with a conscience again. And that goes a long way toward healing.
That's right. That's right. And I think if you're going to have a conscience, you can't help but be aware of the whole consciousness that's feeding into that.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful. I think I think in, I forget which chapter it is in the back of the book, I put some ways to start. Yes. People have often said to me, well, I'm waiting for spirituality. I'm waiting for this event. I'm waiting for something. And I'm like, nothing's going to happen until you do something. It's your consciousness. And you have to do something different with it. Don't sit there waiting for something to take over. That's really a relic of what I'm going to call the religious kinds of ideas, that have been promoted for the last 2,000 years. They're ridiculous. And they are designed to keep us out of our power. We have to take that mantle up again, wear it, play with it, laugh with it, dance with it, make mistakes with it, and go, whoops. All of that. That's what's real. That's what's human.
Exactly. We're souls traveling through this experience, and we're going to have this experience again and again if we wish, or others. It's a choice. So yeah. I think on that note, yes, you wrote of all of these different ways in which we can engage with this beautiful planet we're on. I mean, right today, after you're done watching this, go out and kiss the ground you walk on or hug a tree or something, because we are on an exquisite planet and we're here now, and we have choices we can make now to lift this game up. And that's the most important thing. Once we're out of our body, we'll figure out where we're going to go next. We'll see what's shaken down out of the whole thing.
Amen.
Any final comment, Penny, before we go here?
I think the final comment I would like to make would be, don't be afraid. Don't be fatalistic either. I think we can shift. I think that's what the shift was about. I think the people in the 60s came and started that shift, and then they all got distracted by love and sex and marriage and children and families and jobs. And I think they're here to finish that job.
I would think so. I would think so. I think you're right, because there are a lot of people in this generation that are now starting to wake back up, as you said, from all of these earth challenges to say, whoa, what's happened? How did we sell out? And that's really a good question. And how can we engage?
We were just being human.
Yeah,
exactly. because you need to fall in love, and I'm not going to say you need to have children, but some people need to have children in order to discover what love and care and relationship is really about.
Absolutely.
And I think now that we have some wisdom and some experience, and we're kind of in the power seat, it's really time to implement that and say, okay, what's next? Where do we go?
Agree. And start listening to some of the younger people who actually incarnated under higher frequencies than we incarnated into. Some of these people are absolutely brilliant. They're looking at the whole thing and saying, what a crock. I'm not even going to involve myself. I might as well play video games. So we have to join together. Generations have to join together now and say, no, this place is worth it. It's worth engaging ourselves in. And we're worth engaging with each other.
That's right. That's right. And I think we are anchors for those brilliant. I've been saying for a while, where are the 20-somethings? We need to bring them in. Yeah. They have energy. They have all kinds of stuff that they bring to the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're on the same page. Well, Penny, I want to thank you so much. We've had two really, I think, intense discussions, and I hope you've enjoyed it, watching and joining Penny and I. So until next time, Penny, thank you again for all of your time and for just putting your own questioning and hard work behind this, because we're all looking to wake up together.
Yeah. Amen.
Okay. So again, thank you everybody for watching. The name of Penny's book, Trump, the Sting, the Catastrophe Cycle, and Consciousness. And we're going to underscore the word consciousness. So again, Penny, thank you for everything. It's been a wonderful, wild romp with you.
Okay. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so until next time, again, the name of Penny's book is Trump, the Sting, the Catastrophe Cycle, and Consciousness. Until next time, thank you for joining us here on reginameredith.com.